Station 51, engine 27, engine 32, truck 105.
You're listening to The Fire Break with Steve Wolf.
Welcome back to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing innovative wildfire suppression technology. Check us out on the web at teamwildfire.com. Today, live from Santa Monica, Joe Cavin. Joe is the fire marshal for Santa Monica Fire Department. Well, what a busy place to be. Welcome to the show, Joe. How are you today?
Yeah, doing awesome. Thank you for having me on the show.
You bet. So what's going on in Santa Monica these days?
Well, there's a lot going on in Santa Monica. A couple big topic items. We're still working on some of the schools that have been displaced from the Palisades Fire. So I think we have 5 schools right now relocated in the city. One of the biggest ones we're getting ready to open up, I think in about 2 weeks, is Palisades High, about 2,600 kids. We're going to be putting them in the old Sears building down here, one of the historic buildings. So that's been a big, a big piece to navigate is kind of seeing what codes we can fit them in just to kind of temporarily get them in the city until everything is rebuilt as well.
And
so
that could be a while, right?
One of the big pieces, along with the new release of the WUI maps, the Fire Hazard Severity Zones, which we are now included, a portion of our city.
And what part of the map are you in? The good, the bad, or the ugly?
We have all 3.
Really?
All 3, just a sliver of our city, but yeah, we have all 3. So that's a big learning piece for me because those are parts of the code that I didn't necessarily need to focus on prior to the release of these maps because we were never in these zones. So we kind of implemented our own policies, and now I get the whole shebang. So I've been diving deep in those codes and talking with Cal Fire and the state on what I need to do next.
So how different is what you have to do based on these rezoning maps versus what you had already figured out that you needed to do?
Well, it's quite a bit different. We didn't have too many in place prior. And prior to the release of these maps, after Palisades Fire had already happened, we were already in discussions. We had multiple meetings on which pieces of the code we were going to implement, which pieces we were going to avoid. We didn't want to put any kind of, we didn't want to put the residents in jeopardy of potentially losing their insurance or anything like that. So we were looking at certain aspects of the code. And then when the maps were released, it was like, hey, you got all of it. And it kind of, in a way, made my life easier because now I don't pick and choose what we're going to enforce in the areas. It's like, this is what it is.
It's not me, it's the code.
We got to comply, with the whole.
Right.
So.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what's the delta there between what you had figured out and what you have to do now? It sounds kind of onerous.
Yeah, it's it's still a steep learning curve. I think one of them was everyone's asking what they can do, all the residents in the town hall meetings, what they can do to prevent this or to protect their house. And we're giving them all what we already know. We're directing them to websites and talking about home hardening, talking about defensible space, but none of the defensible space codes were enforceable. We were just encouraging it prior. And that's the biggest one to us because our city is obviously all built out already. When you fall into a fire hazard severity zone, you also fall under Title 14, which is a lot of, it doesn't really apply to our area as much because, like I said, that's road WIS when they're doing construction roads and we're all built out. You also comply with Chapter 7A of building of a new house, and that's all, that's everything. That's the non-combustible roof, the eaves, the vents, all of the construction that comes with a WUI house, a fire hazard severity zone. That would only apply to new construction. So really the only thing with the adoption of this map, other than figuring all this stuff out, is the defensible space area and how that works. A lot of our homes are butt up against Pacific Palisades. So we don't have the 100 feet, from property line to, it's out of our jurisdiction at that point. And we have so many homes close together. So it's kind of just trying to navigate all of that right now. On top of that, things that we're looking about putting in place is we do have a lot of one-way streets on the far end of our town where we were protecting our assets during the fire. And, we talked about implementing no parking on the streets in those areas because we found it was pretty hard to navigate through, which we didn't have before. As well as red flag warning through the whole city. We never had those before. We did under emergency order during that time, but I think we're looking at all those, putting them in place into ordinances.
So how do you think that people interpret the red flag warning? They get a note on their phone, or they drive by the board and it says, fire risk high. And what are they supposed to do with that information?
Yeah, we
not
try.
use their chainsaw or something. I mean, it's Santa Monica.
Red flag warning and the no burn zones, it's just getting it out on social media. So we have a citywide PIO team. So I have a PIO within my division, and she'll meet with the other PIOs, and we try to put it on billboards, on any kind of messaging we can. We use Instagram and Facebook quite a bit to get those messaging out, and then as well as our OEM. Our OEM has a SM alerts, and people can sign up for that, and they have a big portion of the city is signed up for that, so that's helpful.
But when they get a note, what should they do? Pull their kids out of school and be ready to evacuate, or like what's like the level 0 before you get your 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, that would be, and those were things that were very hard to navigate. In the beginning of the fire, we reactivated our OEM, kind of brought everybody in, and the red flag warnings, no, it's not pull your kids out of school. It's just don't burn in your home during those times. Don't have fire pits out, and don't barbecue on charcoal grills, that kind of information. But when it came to the evacuations, that was something we don't do very often. So we did that the best we could in a couple different stages, and it had to be boots on the ground. We have the addresses that we have SM alerts for, but we also identified those that didn't get the messaging after the fact, and we had to do that by sending out police, other staff. Some of my staff wasn't assigned to the EOC during the time, or to the incident, so we would go out and try and do the best we can to make sure people knew they had to evacuate, gather your things. There was plenty of time. As you know, the fire never actually came into the city. We took that stance, and it stopped in the Palisades, but it was all just trying to be proactive, just in case with the high winds that were happening. We wouldn't have had much time if we delayed that. So
right. So you did the evacuations. Where did people go?
We had a couple different centers. They were mostly outside of the city of Santa Monica. So we had them just in West LA. And we put all that messaging out and tried to keep it all unified as well. But we had centers that they could go. A lot of people came to, friends that they have in the city outside of the zone.
Yeah.
But we did not house them in Santa Monica, though.
Okay. So basically, this whole thing came on you really fast. Both the fire and then the subsequent rezoning.
Yes.
Right. So it's like you said, it's a steep learning curve.
Steep learning curve. There's a lot of things, and they're still coming out in all the after actions, of this fire, obviously. One thing we didn't really account for was when we evacuate those areas, the potential for looting, that people would actually take advantage of that. And our police department got, overwhelmed really quick with those kind of, things. So that's why we had to call the National Guard.
Fear of looting or actual looting going on?
No, actual looting.
Really?
Coming in, and I'm sure there was news articles all about it within the Palisades. It happened in Santa Monica too. So we had to implement, no, you weren't allowed to drive in those areas from certain times. And then we had our PD along with National Guard patrolling those areas, having stops up. It's hard to believe that, something that devastating, that many people take advantage of it. But
wow. Yeah. In Santa Monica, of all places. Huh?
Yeah.
You can't be safe there.
Yeah. It does happen, though. So
yeah.
I those were all lessons learned, definitely, from this past fire.
And do you know what kind of things were being looted? I should say stolen. I mean, that's the word, really what they're doing.
And I don't know. There were a couple break-ins within the city. There was a lot within the Pacific Palisades, but prior to us really, getting a hold of it. But I'm not sure what they were actually stealing. I had heard a couple stories. Somebody's safe got broken into within their home, and money was taken. But to that extent, I don't know what else was was taken.
That's scary.
Yeah, the nice thing is everybody has Ring cameras now or some form of digital, something on their house to where we can identify those people.
Yeah. I don't know if that gets them back their stuff, but
right.
Yeah. Wow. How long have you been running Santa Monica?
So I took over in the fire marshal position 3 years ago. It was January of 2022. I've worked for this department since 2009. Started as a firefighter, and about prior to me starting here, I worked for a volunteer fire department. Worked for La Habra Heights Fire Department for about 5 years. And then when I came here, did about 5 years as a firefighter. Came up to fire prevention in the fire inspector position, thinking I never dreamed I would be in this spot. I never wanted this spot when I was younger. It was I was one of those trucky USAR firefighters. Didn't want to go to paramedic school. And I thought, if I go into fire prevention, I'll do 2 years. Little change of schedule. It's something I could put on my resume to promote to captain. And once I came up here, I kind of fell in love with it. So I liked the, I feel like we can help a little more in this position. Excuse me for that.
Vehicle fire.
Commercial vehicle fire.
Yeah.
Hopefully not an electric one, right?
Hopefully not. So came up here, and then it seemed about every 2.5 years, people just retiring, and me promoting through up the ranks in the fire prevention division. So we operate a little different here, but I kind of did a little bit of everything in this, in the prevention side. And again, 3 years ago, I took this spot. Very young for the position. I took the spot at 35. Okay. So I'm 30, just turned 39. And
you don't look it a bit, man.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like I'm going to age very fast now, though.
Right. That new badge.
Yeah.
Carries aging as a consequence.
But, I love it. I've got a great division up here. It's a little hard to navigate for me that, a lot of my people up here, at least the sworn personnel, were either my senior firefighters or, I had a senior captain up here that's now underneath me. So it's hard navigating, those aspects of the supervisor role. Right. But I have such a great team, and they've got a wide range of experience, and they all help me out.
Okay. So it's like that, people who used to be your buddies, now you're their boss.
Yeah. Or people who used to be my boss, now I'm their boss. And it's a little different, but like I said, they're all great.
Yeah. Tell me how you feel that having spent 2 years in the fire prevention role impacted what kind of fire marshal you are.
You know what? I have an understanding, I think, for those positions. I feel that, also being part of the floor, I have an understanding of what I need to convey to the firefighters if we're really pushing something on a department level, and how to speak to them, and, just kind of the meat and potatoes. This is what it is. This is how it's going to benefit you. And this is what we need from you in the field to kind of get out to the public while you're running calls, while you're doing these events. So that helped on that side of it. And just the fire inspector role, being able to do that, to do plan check, to do high-rise inspections, and then, building plan review. It just gave me a better understanding of maybe the stress that's on them too, and what they're going through. And it's just kind of helped me. There's no need to micromanage anyone in this division, but they know I'm always here for them. And so they have their plate, and I know what they need to do, and they get it done. And it all works, well up here. So I think it does help me in my position, seeing those other roles as I went through here and trying to bring them up for the future. I came up so quick, there wasn't much of a transition period, because when I came in January of 22 of this position, we were just coming out of COVID, and a lot of our staff half of our division was just, kind of displaced back on the floor, working on squads and fire engines. And the other half was kind of in and out of the office, a lot of working from home. So I had a very short transition, not knowing I was going to get this position.
Right.
And so that's something I want to fix. I mean, I'm young. I've got at least 11 more years in this position. And so I would like to just kind of set everyone else up for success the best I can.
So that
And
they
at
don't
least
have
make
such
them
a
know
quick
this is a high
transition, right?
possibility. Yeah.
Right. So you're grooming your replacement, and you've got 11 years to get them ready for it.
Right. Right. And I can potentially already see it in the fire inspector rank now, who could go through those ranks if they decide to.
Okay. So when you see people, who are in the ranks below you, what are the things that you spot in them that say, this guy's fire marshal material, or this girl's captain material, or whatever it might be?
There's a few things I think for me, and I'm just looking at my experience of what I've had here. One is just being a big team member. The ability to get along with everyone in the office, I think, is very big.
Yeah.
I really look for humility. That's something that when I was a young firefighter, I didn't necessarily have too much of.
You were a young firefighter. I mean,
yeah.
You don't see a lot of that.
But really, having that understanding that we need support. There's a lot of things that I don't know, but I've got a great network, and it's continuing to grow, that I'm not afraid to ask somebody, call somebody. And I like to see that in someone else rather than just kind of be a recluse if they don't know what to do and trying to figure it out, and then eventually coming to me when it's too late,
I see. So people don't know what to do, or they have questions about something, or you want them to just be forthright about that. Say, hey, I don't know what I don't know. And if you know, help me out here.
Yeah, exactly. And I even take that approach when we have, we're dealing with a lot of changes legislatively in California, and in Santa Monica, we're seeing it too, a big push from the architects and building industry. And there's things, everyone loves to come to Santa Monica and try something new as well. So we get a lot of things, that we've never seen before, that's brand new, that we don't have codes for. And everyone has a fire protection, specialist on staff, or, somebody to help with that. And I always just pick their brain. Hey, this is something new. This is what I'm thinking. Like, what do you have? What kind of codes do you have that I can use towards this? Help me to help you. Because, I think that approach goes far, and I build relationships that way as well with them.
You say you're seeing a lot of new things come to Santa Monica. Do people think of Santa Monica as kind of a proving ground for testing out new ideas?
I feel like they've always tried here. I don't know if it's just a West Coast thing. Maybe it's not just me, but we started with the company's called Coco, but they're little robot on wheels. You can order food just like Uber Eats, and the thing picks up the food. That started here early on. We have the autonomous cars in here in LA and San Francisco, where now they're all throughout the city. So we have a lot of these things. A big push now that started a couple years ago for me is they're trying to push the single stairwell, which is a big debate, big discussion item.
What is that?
So they would like to build apartment buildings up to 6 stories with a single stairwell. And that was,
so no alternative means of egress.
Correct. So that started for us in January of 2023, and now it's at the state level. That hasn't been approved by me or the state level yet, but there's a task force. I'm actually sitting on that task force, developing what it would look like and what the actual limit is from the current code. Current code is 3 stories. NFPA allows 4 stories, but there's certain jurisdictions within the United States and really abroad that have less restrictive standards.
I see. Or more staircases. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does that make you nervous, the idea of that single staircase in a 6-story building?
It does a little bit. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why we implemented fire escapes in the early 1900s to add that second stairwell to the building. So to remove it, what kind of my stance on it, if we change it at the state level, when they first came here, it was, if you change it at the state level, great. I'll go with what the state, they've done the research, and they're going to tell me what's safe, but I don't want that liability personally.
Yeah.
Allowing a 6-story building, removing an exit.
Right.
There's that option of always doing an alternate means and methods, but if you do an alternate means and methods, that's a change to the code that has to be as good or better than what the code prescribes. And
Yeah.
I don't know how you get there by removing an exit.
Right. So you came up through the practicality of, firefighting, a boots on the ground guy. And now you might be getting, conflicting information from the state about what's okay. Are there people at the state level that you actually trust have that boots on the ground experience to make the right, code? Or do you feel like it's, politicians raise their hand and all of a sudden the law changes and now a stupid idea is the law?
No, and I'm actually a part of that state task group now that's working on it. So it's the special interest groups that are pushing this in the name of, the housing crisis and several other items. Affordability of affordable housing is really the big push for this. And so now that I'm on that task group, we have it was Assembly Bill 835 was the single stairwell request for the state to come back with, what it could look like to possibly have a 6-story single stair building, or what we think is safe.
Okay.
So I'm part of that task group, and we have sub task groups that are talking about the fire protection measures it would need, what we could do to potentially make this work. And so I feel a little comfortable now because I'm part of it.
Yeah.
But again, the problem is with all these code changes that are less restrictive, there's not enough of us in the fire service that are willing to take part in this. And unfortunately, a lot of times the special interest groups outweigh, the fire prevention folks that are on the calls or making the decisions. So we're trying our best, but I've started encouraging my folks to start getting involved in these committees and these task groups, because we need more people involved from the fire service to kind of show our side of it. Hey, this is why we have it, and this is, from a practical sense, this is the problems I'm going to have when you do this.
Yeah, and there seems to be a new tactic afloat for people who want to get what they want. They're going to, Joe, we want you to do this. Our building association lobby says we could save a few $100,000 if we take out that thing. And so we want this new law passed. And you say, oh, I don't know if this is such a good idea. And they're like, all right, well, then we're coming for your job. Right.
Yeah. And, actually, NFPA put out a really good report that I think it just recently came out, the assault on safety. And I was reading it and I'm like, this is exactly what I'm dealing with at the local level. And some of the findings were the same as kind of what I've seen. And I think one big thing we need to do is really start. I've always kind of been open, and I've known, like, I can't just always be the no person. I've got to be willing to work with them, because that's the issue we're seeing at the state level and actually across the United States, is they view us as the no people. So they don't even consult with us anymore. They're just going to make the changes legislatively, and, we deal with the aftermath. I would like to, regain some of those relationships, even within my city council. I was just talking with the fire chief. It'd be nice to regain those relationships so they know, the council members know, and even at the state level, they know, we're willing to work with you. Let's make this safe for everyone and try to accommodate both sides.
Interesting. And then the insurance regulations will follow from that, because they're not part of the code, right? They're independent, and they can say, okay, yeah, your building's to code, but we don't think this code's a great idea, and we're not going to insure it.
Yeah.
From life safety standpoint.
Right.
Yeah. And then if they can't get insurance, they probably can't get the building built in the first place.
That's right. And, the insurance is, and I don't want to go into this too deep, because this is a huge topic and a lot of questions we've been asked, not only on our level. I mean, CAL FIRE has a laundry list of questions, and they refer to the insurance agency, but they ask what's going to happen to my insurance now that with these fire hazard severity zones. And we don't know. We can kind of anticipate. You look at the insurance, the publications that the insurance companies put out, and they do state that they don't use these fire hazard severity zones. They look at risk. They're not looking at the wildfire.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if any of that plays. I would say that what I'm going to do in my city is really encourage them to, even though we're not going to enforce home hardening,
Hmm.
to really look at that, because I think that'll help them get a break on their insurance, or even, that might make them have insurance if they're looking at potentially being dropped.
Yeah. No, that's a big question for people.
Yeah.
Is okay, I'm willing to do the home hardening, which is going to lower the insurance company's risks. Are they going to reflect that in my premiums or not?
Yeah. And I would hope the fire hazard severity zones don't impact it too much,
Yeah.
because those are based on the wildfire, not really the homes. But
Right.
the home hardening would be the biggest piece for somebody to get a break on their insurance, I
Yeah.
think.
Do you feel like your population there is characterizing the fires they saw coming towards them as a wildfire, or are they seeing it as a structure to structure issue, which is how I see it?
You're talking about the public?
Yeah, the public.
The public looks at it as a wildfire.
Okay. Right. Even though there's
Definitely, from everyone I've talked to, they've looked at them as a big wildland fire.
interesting. Even though
Yeah.
it's not, it's downtown.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But so they're basically naming the fire after where it might have started, not how it's behaving within their community.
Right.
Right. If with the first house, if you're having 80, 90 mile an hour winds and the first house caught a fire from a barbecue, yes, it behaves like a wildfire where the houses are the trees, but
Right.
would they say the city was burnt down by a barbecue fire? Right.
Yeah, and you look at it, and that's a little bit of the educational piece when people are asking questions. Why are those trees still standing in the middle of all these homes, and why is this house standing, and that's kind of a little bit of the education to them. It doesn't run like a wave, just from one end to the other.
Right.
And so we're doing a little of that educational piece now. Obviously, we're inundated with calls and on multiple different topics, but that is kind of one I think I get maybe once a week from somebody.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to see the pie chart of what people are calling about.
Yeah.
30% about insurance, 40% about home hardening or whatever. So you could kind of monitor the pulse of what the public's really thinking.
Right.
And then you can alter your education approach to that.
Yes. And we're getting better at that kind of stuff, being able to monitor and track that. I think, a big portion of the calls too are just neighbors telling on neighbors, hey, they're doing this, and then we're going to go out and investigate.
They want you to bring the stick and not the carrot, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell
They
me
always
about
look at my division as, if no one else is doing anything about this problem, it's got to be a fire hazard. So let's call the fire department and.
So you're facing a whole range of challenges now, legislation, dealing with insurance, dealing with new codes, home hardening, maybe evacuation route hardening, different strategies on direct attack. How much do you feel that, your original fire school training helped you with this, and how much of it is new stuff that you've got to learn and figure out as you go?
Most of this is new stuff for me.
For everyone, right? I mean,
yeah. But specifically, like the last week or 2 weeks, pretty much since the maps were released, I've just been diving in the codes and trying to understand it. And I know they're coming out with the new IWUI code, which combines all three of them, and it's going to be a lot easier to read. But for now, I've got what I've got, and trying to navigate this. Like I said, I phone a friend a lot. Hey, what are you doing? Right after this, I've got a call with one of the other fire marshals that sits on the board, the Cal FPO board, and to just discuss what can I do in these areas, what do I not need to do, where does this ordinance live where I adopt it, those kind of things. But when it comes to speaking to the residents one-on-one, I do feel like my past experience on the fire engine has helped a lot. And in particular, not as much with the wildland. I have a wildland background a little bit. I did in La Habra Heights, we had a WUI area and we did brush inspections. I used to go on a lot of strike teams in La Habra Heights. And when I came here in Santa Monica, I was on the USAR team. And when they started deploying REM teams, the rapid extraction modules, I would go out to the wildland there. And it was about maybe 6 years ago when I kind of moved up far enough to where if I go out now, all my work is sitting behind and I can't leave for 15 days anymore. Plus my family, I've got 3 kids at home and they're happy that I'm here. I'm not,
Oh, great. How old are
I'm
your
not,
kids?
hey, I'll see you in a couple weeks. Not doing that anymore.
How old are your
But I
kids,
think
Joe?
it has helped a lot when I'm talking to the individuals one-on-one, knowing and replaying some of those things in my head. In 2007, when the fires were really bad up north, having to drive past what we just kind of had in the Palisades, drive
Yeah.
past perfectly, nice homes that are just starting to catch on fire, but it's like I have to get somewhere else right now, and then once we get to it, and knowing we've only got 5 engines and we've got 10 houses, kind of triaging those houses. Hey, what are we going to take a stance on? What's safe for us? So I think from that aspect, I look at when I'm talking to them individually and looking at their home, like, hey, this would benefit it. I mean, the code is what it is, and there's code sections, but to bring that reality, like, this is what I would see, this is what I would do, I think is a help.
Yeah, when they talk about the defensible space around a home, that's kind of the homeowner perspective, right? This home could be saved, but the firefighter's perspective might be, can I protect this home safely without endangering myself and my crew?
Right.
And to what degree do those things overlap or not? Because you might have the home is defensible, but it's a one way in, one way out with overhanging trees and this and that. And you say, like, it's not a safe situation for the crew.
Right. And we try to make it as safe as possible. And if something's really, really bad and we're low on resources, we do take those things into consideration as well. I mean, we have to.
When are you not low on resources?
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I know. But I mean, once a incident is established to a certain point, then, we have a little more manpower. It's not like the initial attacks when, we don't have air operations available. We don't have, all the resources kind of before we implement those type 1 teams and establish them for a wildland fire.
I say, when I was watching the map of the fire, day by day, watching that line get closer and closer to Santa Monica, I was wondering, like, where's the fire break? Where do you draw the line? What's your line in the sand? And what are the things that you were thinking at that time about how you're going to try to keep the fire out of Santa Monica?
Well, I was involved in these conversations, but this was more of ops that were a big part of it, our operations side. There was a couple things. One, our big fear, we did not want it. We wanted to take a hard stance at, it's called Mandeville Canyon. It's on the northern side of our city up into the Palisades, because there was a fire in there, I would say 30 years ago. And if something came down, if it came down the Mandeville Canyon, there was a potential for our city. So we were worried about that. And the division on that side of the city took a real hard stance with a lot of air operations, backup. And we dug that as a hard line. And then on top of the resources that were added to the incident, we also upstaffed the whole duration of the fire and put them on the north side at our city border and within the Palisades down, at the base, to just outside of the incident. The incident was aware that we had additional resources, but we didn't put all of our resources in the incident because we wanted to just be able to protect our assets as well.
Okay. You said the new IWUI codes are coming down, kind of an integrated thing. How do you define the WUI? Because that term's pretty widely thrown around and different people have a different idea. Is it the first house next to the forest? Is it a mile in? When you think WUI, where do you draw that line?
Just me personally, I see it in the Pacific Palisades. I don't see our city being in the WUI, but I see a high potential for that structure to structure, catch in portions of our city. I wouldn't consider any of ours, in the WUI. We just have that threat a little bit, but wildland urban interface, when I haven't dealt much with it because, like I said, that was kind of a realm that didn't apply to us too much. We knew there was potential for threat, but like everyone says after these fires, I never thought it would come into my city. I didn't think it would come that close to my city. So, thank God it didn't come into our city, but at the same time, it was eye-opening for us. We do need to watch out for this. I mean, the situation, the circumstances aligned where it was pretty extreme in that case, but we're seeing it more and more. And for ours, we're trying to look at modeling and seeing, how far we need to kind of make preparations for. The Fire Hazard Severity Zone maps helps us. We're definitely using that. We're not planning on adding anything to it, but internally, we're kind of looking at potential other areas. Because we do have the issues with the Santa Monica Bluffs, with the Santa Monica Freeway, where you have that potential of the hillside catching and it going to the homes as well. So we're kind of preparing for that, working with Caltrans to try and cut back on some of that brush and brush down on the Palisades, on the bluffs down there by PCH.
So evacuation route hardening is really part of your concern there.
Yes, that's a discussion. In fact, that's another discussion I have today lined up about, readdressing our safety element and local hazard mitigation plan and adding some of those and really taking a look at our evacuation routes, our secondary evacuation routes. We have them for all the potential, tsunami, and we had them for the wildfire, but now we just lived them. So while it's still fresh, we want to really look at those and see what we can do better in those areas.
And for the areas that were completely burned out, not in Santa Monica, but nearby, that helps you a little bit right now because there's no fuel surrounding you, right? They've already been consumed.
Right.
And then as they rebuild, from your perspective, you might say, well, they're replacing the fuels now.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of concern about how they do that.
Right. And there is, and that's not my area. I have an opinion on that, and there was executive orders came back, and I understand both sides. I understand the need for these people because I'm in meetings with them every week. All the schools, and it's awesome. For me to see the kids when I get a school somewhere in the city that we can make work for them, and we get the kids back together. It's great seeing them, knowing they lost their house. They've been isolated for the last couple of weeks, not knowing the future for them. It's nice seeing them back with their friends, their peers, and just kind of playing and having fun. So that's nice. And I see that side of it. And I feel for the homeowner that just wants to rebuild and get their house back up. But if we rebuild like for like they're potentially doing, it might increase how fast they can get their house rebuilt and moved in. But I personally don't think it's the right decision. I think a lot of the costs for like a Class A combustible roof it doesn't cost much more to go with a combustible roof than it does something else. Yeah. And, my fear is if they rebuild the way they had it before, they won't be able to get insurance. I would think in order to get insurance in those areas, they would need to bring it up to current code. Sure. Because it just ran through, and a lot of houses in that area weren't to code. They were built a long time ago, and so we don't want that potential in the future. It would be better to just build them to code now, and we look at different ideas and there's discussions with temporary housing and all of that for these people to get them in while their home is rebuilt the right way. Right. So we'll see where that lies. That's out of my hands, but that's just kind of my take on it.
So if they go back and rebuild like what they had, would you categorize that as basically restacking the dominoes?
Potentially. I think it's one piece if they rebuild their house. The defensible space is huge and would have to be enforced in that area. Yeah. But you still run the potential if you built the house exactly as it is.
Yeah, and they're so close to each other.
Right. That's the big problem, is that they're so close to each other. So I think it would potentially be stacking the dominoes again. And the only thing I can do, again, even with the home hardening, all we can do is encourage the best we can on the north side of our city and
Right.
enforce the defensible space, at least up to our city lines. That's something I don't know how it's going to work. The 100 feet past into the Palisades. I'll have to talk with Cal Fire if that's part of them, or LA, whoever runs that area, if it's a SRA or LRA. And we'll go from there. But all I can do is encourage the home hardening and enforce the new building codes on new buildings being built.
Yeah, right.
And just kind of get that messaging out. Like, this is going to benefit you,
yeah,
and potentially your insurance rates. So
yeah, right. It's like you have jurisdiction over the ember bed, but you don't have jurisdiction over the ember casting area.
Right. And the problem with having, I think in the Pacific Palisades and even our home, with having it as encouraging these things but not making it mandatory, the homes being built to the standard now of Chapter 7A of the building code, they're not meant to be 30 feet from the next building that's not protected. So they're still
Right.
at risk. There's homes that were built exactly to code that burnt to the ground. I mean, that's not how they're designed to work. So you run that risk, and you kind of put everyone at risk when you allow them to rebuild how they want.
Right. Yeah. No, there's an old Chinese curse, and it says, "May you live in interesting times." And it sounds like this has befallen you. You're certainly living in an interesting time there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wish you all the best with that, Joe. And
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining us. And I think anybody who lives under your jurisdiction there would really enjoy meeting you and hearing from you and inviting you to their meetings and having your input and your very open manner. That you grew up recognizing the value of humility in the people around you, and I think that sets you up to be able to go in there and answer questions with, "I don't know, let's find out together."
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your podcast today.
You bet. Joe Cavin is the fire marshal for Santa Monica. Thanks for joining us here on the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one.